Hello everyone and welcome to SplitSecond's Instant Commander, the series where we give you fresh strategies for commanders that are both established or still looking for a path. Today we're here to show you guys our Rakdos Lord of Riots Beefstorm. Keep in mind, this list is tailored to our own metagame. We will still provide you with budget options that can also help you adapt the deck's power level to your LGS. If you want even more, just ask in the comments below, join us on Discord, or leave a comment on the deck list at Moxfield. Now, who is Rakdos Lord of Riots? Rakdos is a 6/6 demon with flying and trample. He is played for his bottom text lines, which read that creature spells you cast cost 1 less generic mana for each 1 life your opponent's lost on the current turn. This ability is somewhat similar to Animar, but it gives Rakdos a different kind of explosiveness, allowing him to go faster towards bigger creatures and payoffs at the expense of being easier to disrupt. It should be noted that Rakdos has a casting restriction. You cannot play him if none of your opponents lost life that turn. This is something you always need to consider when deck building for the Lord of Riots. Although the Lord of Riots has some popularity, we wanted to give him more focused ways of winning that did not involve Kiki-Jiki lines, which do not use his static ability at all, but rather win cons that play to his strengths and combo pieces that are still efficient by themselves. Besides that, we also wanted to use Rakdos' ability as a way to directly fight stacks decks, which are the ones that most often can stop you from winning. We chose a wide array of large creatures that you can cast slowly if stacks, or really fast if unimpeded, doubling up as a way to push you towards combo lines. Hence the name, Rakdos Beefstorm. The game plan. A Rakdos Lord of Riots deck is pretty reliant on the commander to get things rolling. Even though this deck is looking to storm out, the storm elements are creatures and the cost reduction from Rakdos is vital to achieve this goal. As such, you are required a few somewhat awkward creatures or spells/abilities that passively damage your opponents in order to enable casting your commander. The upside of this is, effectively, that many of these can become combo pieces or enablers for more explosive turns. When you look at your starting hand, you should make sure you have something balanced. This can look like a Rakdos enabler and a payoff, or perhaps it's tutors and interaction, or simply smaller enablers and card selection. There's plenty of ways to go about it, but you should always make sure to only bring out Rakdos when you need him, either to boost your next turn or, if possible, the current one. Remember, your deck relies on Rakdos to do a lot of things, so you need to be mindful that he is often prime meat for the chopping block. Once you have Rakdos out, you should be looking towards dealing about 4 to 10 total damage to your opponents that turn. You can make do with as little as 1 to 3, but ideally you're going further up. Once you have that damage and your commander, your goal is to rapid fire creatures, preferably colorless or not color intensive, while looking for ways to draw or tutor for more cards. This way, you can easily reach endgame situations like Perforous God of the Forge and Ancestral Statue, or sillier interactions like Cloudstone Curio, Dockside Extortionist, and some Eldrazi with a dominant casting trigger such as one of the Ulamogs. However, you don't always need to combo. In fact, several times it will be enough for you to get some massive creatures on the table and swing, or play toxic creatures like Void Winnower to seriously attack other decks and their ability to play while you pummel their life totals. Now let's check the deck's strengths and weaknesses. This deck is good against stacks decks that run low creature interaction, aggro-centric decks, mid-range decks, slower or purely creature-based combo decks. This deck struggles against faster combo decks, especially if the rest of the table can't interact. Stacks decks heavy on anti-creature spells, or anti-draw. Now that you know the general theory behind Rakdos Beefstorm, let's look into our strategies. Strategy number 1. Enabling the demon. Before getting into more detail on how to win with this deck, we have to start from the beginning. Rakdos cannot be cast without an opponent losing life, and so we need to look into the best ways to get this done. The best cards that enable casting Rakdos will be cards that accomplish one of 3 things. First, they do other things besides attacking or dealing damage in a turn. These will be cards like Harsh Mentor, who doubles up as a hate bear against popular winning conditions, Azra Oddsmaker, who draws you cards, Captain Lannery Storm, who ramps you, Nettle Drone, who can help you combo out with Ancestral Statue, or Plague Spitter, which kills off a bunch of dorks, and utility cards like Dark Confidant. Secondly, these are cards that can deal a lot of damage in a single turn to get you a nice boost for Rakdos on the same turn he comes out. Spawn of Mayhem, Lobber Crew, and Tectonic Giant are some solid examples. Thirdly, they are non-creature permanents that achieve the goal while leaving you less susceptible to mass creature removal. Cryptolith Fragment, albeit slow, is one of them. Sanctum of Stone Fangs is another. Finally, it should be noted that, even for casual, Vedalken Orrery is not a good option for Rakdos. Players will have no incentive to attack other players besides you, for they have no reason to enable instant speed Ulamogs from the damage they dealt to others, unless of course you like the attention. Strategy number 2. Thick combo lines. One of the most surprising elements to this deck is how easily it can be underestimated. A turn where all your creatures cost -6 just from Rakdos' attack alone can easily turn into a victorious one. At times, it might even surprise you since you were just digging to see how far the cards you have can take you and, well, they took you to the top position. The simpler combo lines for this deck revolve around two main cards or effects. The first is Ancestral Statue. Think Animar combo lines, but with bigger butts. If your opponents lost at least 4 life in total during your turn, you can cast this statue for free. Now, you can pair it up with Impact Tremors, Perforus God of the Forge, Bontius Monument, or Terror of the Peaks to deal lethal damage to all your opponents while bouncing the statue. You can also use the statue with the Rakdos Enabler Nettle Drone and ping everyone for lethal since the statue untaps the drone with each cast. As an advice, we suggest you don't be too greedy about not casting the statue. If you're stuck and a huge value engine like Kozilek the Great Distortion is on the table, you can also use the statue to bounce it right back into your hand and draw a bunch of cards. Don't limit yourself to combo lines. The second key card for combo lines is Cloudstone Curio. The amount of damage required from Rakdos for you to win depends on the creatures you are looking to cast. You can look towards a discounted Dockside Extortionist with another creature and one of the Impact Tremors effects we are packing. You can also use the Extortionist with a draw on ETB engine like Rick's Mighty Reveler to look for a win con. The Curio has other uses, however. With enough damage, you can go as far as bouncing the Extortionist with one of the on-cast Eldrazi's like Oblivion Sower to exile everyone else's libraries, the Ulamogs to get rid of people's permanents, Emrakul to gain control of each opponent's next turn and destroy them with their own cards, or the Kozilek Butcher of Truth to draw your library. In fact, you can just bounce 2 Eldrazi off of each other and win. These are your combo lines. The cool part is that these creatures separately can create a lot of board pressure and value, so even without the assembled pieces, there are still things for your opponents to fear and consider. Strategy number 3. Storming, now with 50% more beef. The cool aspect of this deck is how several cards synergize with each other in different ways, allowing you to storm or build towards a victory just off of sheer beef. This is because the deck has a higher than average number of creatures that have relevant triggers or abilities on cast or ETB, besides the ones meant to enable Rakdos. If you're looking to win and have a minimum of 4 damage total dealt to opponents, you need to pay attention to 1. How much mana you have of each color and colorless. You should try saving 2 colorless mana for Kozilek the Great Distortion if you think your damage to opponents will reach a high enough number. Besides that, you should be saving your 2 color mana for last, and prioritize using black mana over red mana unless you have a tutor for Krieg Son of Yawgmoth, even if that tutor is just a Razagath. Always prioritize casting your colorless creatures and Eldrazi with the exception of Kozilek the Great Distortion and Sandstone Oracle. Oblivion Sower is especially useful since it can bring you even more mana, while doubling up as a win con with Cloudstone Curio. Ponder what is best for you at every given moment, a tutor or card draw. Tutors can directly search for win cons, but if you only have one at hand, it might be smarter to use it to dig for something like Disciple of Bolas, should you have an Eldrazi to sacrifice for it, or No Spine Dragon if an opponent was dealt a lot of damage during the current turn. At other times, if you have card selection creatures, you can consider a Cloudstone Curio to start bouncing them and dig further for the winning pieces. Or, if you have enough creatures, you can play the build your own combo game with Razagath. If you fizzle, don't be upset. Instead, try to maximize the amount of power on the board. At times, you can end the turn with 30+ power on the table. Someone will die if they don't react. Strategy number 4. Disruptive Colossuses. Although this list is barely running any cheap proactive disruption, its top end is very well supplied with creatures that will make your opponents wish they'd stop you sooner. In a way, they count as alternative win cons just because the chaos they wreak will often be enough for you to successfully claim victory. Sire of Insanity and Myosian of Night's Reach are the first couple. If you are in a storming turn and realize you are going nowhere, you can fill the board as much as possible and stop at Sire. People will be on top deck mode, except your board is possibly the talk of the town. Myosian of Night's Reach will often be a triple black spell, or 6 life if we're talking Crick, that instantly allows you to discard your opponent's hands. You can use this to either protect a combo turn, or simply pass, wait for your next opponent to draw for a turn, and then discard everyone's hand. Void Winnower is the second card. It will often silence entire game plans, and the rest of the table will suddenly become that much more aware of how their mana costs are distributed across their decks, like painfully aware. This card is even funnier if a Stacks player that is a Cobblepot fan has cracked up a Chalice of the Void for 1 or a Sanctum Prelate for 1 or 3. Emrakul the Promised End is one of Sakera's favorite cards to play against cEDH decks, and it can literally destroy single or multiple players. Chain of Vapor suddenly means bounce this person's board and sacrifice their lands. Ad nauseum, Necropolis, Demonic Consultation, and Theta Pact translate into you're dead. Also, you still get to blow all their interaction, tutors, or combo payoffs on nothing if necessary, or on other players too. And don't forget that you can attack with their commander, block it with Emrakul, kill it, and put it into their own graveyard. Finally, depending on timing, as these can be dropped as early as turn 4, the Kozileks and Ulamoks can also be pretty oppressive for various reasons, be it Annihilator, exiling 20 cards from people's libraries, or countering the spells willy-nilly by discarding cards that share their CMC. Strategy number 5. Setting up your games. This deck is mostly a non-proactive combo deck with aggro lines. That's a bunch of big words, but what they mean is that it is not your role to police the table or to preemptively try to stop other people from winning. There will be people all around you trying to war overboard advantage, which is fine. But it is your role to focus on progressing your game plan and, if necessary, interact with the table. Your first turns should always look like you trying to ramp up with Moxen, Mana Crypt, Sol Ring, or one of the 2 CMC rocks. You can also try to cantrip or use your card advantage tools to prepare, but generally it's better to focus on ramping or playing a Rakdos enabler. After that, it's your goal to cast and if necessary, protect Rakdos. Then, you're trying to win the game. In between these, disruption will very likely happen or someone will get very ahead. Try to gauge whether that is a fight you want to participate in, bringing that person down, or if the rest of the table can handle it. As for protecting your board, generally at this point it should look non-threatening. Even with Rakdos out, it's hard for people to properly assess how much you will get done without knowing your hand. If you lose Rakdos, decide for yourself whether looking to recast him is a good idea, or if it's better to first go for a larger creature to try and bait a reaction or set up a Rakdos turn with lots of damage already dealt and available to reduce the CMC from the next creatures you will cast. At all times, remind yourself that this is a pretty selfish game plan. Try to keep removal only for key hate pieces, and if you are sure your opponents aren't running anything that hits you, only then consider the engines or enemy commanders. Do not waste resources unnecessarily, since you are the one most likely to not recover if you mismanage them. Strategy number 6. Hate enchantments. Ma'am, this is Rakdos. If you look at the Rakdos list, you will notice some key fragilities that Stacks players can try to exploit. Tutoring, card drawing, ETB hate, and storming. These are all common hate targets, although you are well equipped to deal with most of them. You have plenty of versatile cards that also remove creatures, like Chandra Torch of Defiance, both Goblin Crater Maker and Goblin Sharpshooter, or Abrade. You'll also notice that some of these cards also destroy annoying artifacts, Torpor Ore being the greatest offender. We also have other versatile cards like Rakdos Charm to interact if needed. However, even with Chaos Warp, and most hilariously both Ulamogs, you will still struggle to remove enchantments. Now, one of the single most annoying of these is Rule of Law. But don't be stressed, you may be cut out from combo when this annoying spell sticks to the board, but you are still more than capable to play creatures that most high power decks aren't well equipped to deal with consistently. In fact, If you are up against a hate deck, it's smart of you to consider piggybacking on their strategy and riding towards gigantic beaters rather than combo. Just beware how much value or how much stifling they're becoming, and whether or not you should help de-escalate all that anger in their soul. Strategy number 7. How the protein comes together. So now that you have a general idea of how to pilot and navigate the deck, here are some pieces of advice on synergies or interactions that you may not immediately perceive when first playing this deck. This is to help you milkshake like a pro. Sometimes it's a lot smarter to delay your Rakdos casting by one turn if you need to play Terror of the Peaks, Perforus, or Impact Tremors first. This way, Rakdos himself will trigger these and accumulate life loss for that turn, giving you a window of opportunity to storm the same turn you play him. Also remember that Rakdos untaps Slobber Crew, so cash in on those pings. Crick is one of the top creatures for winning turns beside outlets. He allows you to optimize black mana symbols in a way no other card can by replacing the casting with life spent, making any black creature basically free with Rakdos, apart from the life you pitch. It also super optimizes tutors. Don't use Chandra's red mana ability unless you really have to. Most of the time, it's better to deal 6 damage to your opponents and bank on that discounted mana. In fact, with every single modal card you have, unless you are in desperate need of the other mode, always consider the option that damages your opponents. If you don't think trying to combo is safe, save your major resources for later and focus on playing large beaters. With sack outlets like Burnt Offering or Disciple of Bolas, always prioritize sacrificing the cards that are less likely to be valuable if you hit a Cloudstone Curio. Go as big as you can while making sure you aren't accidentally taking all your sweet value away. Budget options. In this section, we'll be covering some of the budget options you can use for the most expensive or harder to get cards in this deck. We will only use this section for cards pricing over $20, but if you want more options, just focus in the comments. Unfortunately, this deck does have a few pricey cards, however, it is definitely playable on a budget versus mid-power decks. We start up with Dockside Extortionist. He is an incredible mono-red staple that definitely needs more prints and not everyone can access. Because of Rakdos' unique nature as a CMC reducer, you can consider cards like Priest of Urabrask as a replacement. It's not as good, but still allows you to combo out with Cloudstone Curio and several outlets like Nullspine Dragon, Seasoned Pyromancer, or Eldrazi's. You can also consider Priest of Gix, but it's not as good and requires you to get black self-replacing card draw creatures like Demon Lord Belzenlock to combo. Speaking of him, Seasoned Pyromancer is also at a tough price range. Lucky for you, red doesn't like creatures with looting ETBs, and Ox of Agonas does a nice job. The Pyromancer's advantage is mostly CMC and producing tokens for Razaketh. Next up, we have the Eldrazi Titans, specifically both Ulamox, Emrakul, and Kozilek Butcher of Truth. The biggest issue with replacing them willy-nilly with other Eldrazi is that the cast triggers of some of these actually wins you games. You can still consider Artisan of Kozilek for reanimation, Desolation Twin to make Infinite 10/10 Eldrazi, Villis if you're prioritizing Crick to abuse the life loss, Endless One if you're just looking for a cheap way to bounce other Eldrazi with Curio, etc. Nonetheless, these Titans are some of the meat of the deck and they really make a difference. Tutors are also an important matter for this deck, specifically Imperial Seal, Vampiric, and Demonic Tutors. What's important here is trying to have access to the best tutors you can get while avoiding gamble just because, well, it's a gamble and you can't do much if you discard the wrong card, plus it's harder to abuse with Crick. You can try and get Scheming Symmetry, Grim Tutor, maybe even Witchclaw Talisman if you're going for combo-centric lines. You can also consider Sidisi, Undead Vizier, and Runescar Demon just because they utilize Rakdos CMC reduction well, although it's dangerous to bank the entire deck on your commander. Mana rocks, like Tutor, are vital for a speedier deck. Still, you can try and look for cheaper mana rocks, prioritizing those that cost 2 mana and give colors, since the deck needs more color fixing and less colorless mana. You have the Charcoal and Fire Diamonds for starters, and then can start looking towards Coalition Relic, Commander Sphere, etc. Cloudstone Curio in theory is irreplaceable. Still, you can simply move to cheaper combo lines utilizing Kiki Jiki, Get Jiki, Combat Celebrant, and Zealous Conscripts. You can also consider Mock Fanatic, Conspicuous Snoop, and Goblin Recruiter as a secondary combo line. Just don't forget that Rakdos is on this list to abuse. Necropotence is draw on demand. You can consider swapping it for some sustained draw permanent like Phyrexian Arena, or just get yourself some storm draw with Sign in Blood. Finally, the land base. Rakdos, Lord of Riots, has a very particular land base because of his casting cost. Double black and double red. Nith-Mizzet Paron fans will know what this can feel like. Rakdos also has the added challenge of Kozilek the Great Distortion, which demands double colorless to cast, so you need to be very smart about your fixing, getting as many lands that provide both red and black mana as possible, and, if you can, also get lands that can provide either color and colorless. That's why there's also Ifnir Deadlands in the list. This is partially why Urborg is super good on this list, because it helps smoothen some kinks in your land base. This sums up our instant commander for Rakdos, Lord of Riots. We totally recommend you guys to check the deck list we're using and make the necessary tweaks you need to show your friends the hidden storming power of Rakdos. Remember, if you need help adapting this deck to your budget or meta, or have any ideas or suggestions to help improve it, come hang in our Discord server, the link for which is in the description below, or just leave us a comment. We'd like to start the credits by thanking our current patrons, and especially Izanagi, Stefan, DJ Rap, Mike Purr, Ajimo, Eagle, Heated Chill, Drunken Housecat, and Francois, our stack breakers. If you want to support us, you can do so by liking this video, subscribing, or by becoming a patron yourself. Come with us again next week for more split-second videos. See you all then.